All right, kiddos, this is our last holes video. You have done it. You have made it through 4 weeks of holes, and I am so proud of you. And today we're going to finish it. And all these loose ends about Hector Zeroni and Madam Zeroni and Trout Walker and the warden, whose last name is Walker, and Sam and Kissin' Kate and Stanley Ilnats and his great-great-grandfather, right? They're all going to meet in the middle today as we finish up our book. So you see a new anchor chart behind me today, finally. Today we're going to talk about theme. We've talked about theme some, but I wanted to remind you what it was. Theme is the message in a story. And you see here that these are different colors and I have a line because this says theme. But if I break it apart, it says the message in a story. So what did you learn from the story that you can apply to real life? You have a sheet glued into your reading journal back at school that has all these themes in it. Honesty is the best policy. Don't judge a book by its cover. Choose your friends wisely. Actions have consequences. All of those things. So instead of me having you pick the theme for the book, I'm going to tell you what the theme is. There are actually lots of themes of this book, but one that I felt is really important for you guys to understand is that choices have consequences. Every choice we make has consequences, and Stanley learns that. Stanley makes a lot of choices through our book, and he learns that they all have consequences. So what I'm asking you to do today is to give me 3 big choices, not just from what I read to you today, but from the entire book that Stanley makes. Okay? I'm going to give you some hints. Think back to giving X-Ray the tube. Think back to sneaking away for 0. Think back to going to dig the last hole. Okay? Those are all things to be thinking about to help you tell me 3 big choices, and then your graphic organizer is even going to say, why were they big choices? What consequences did those choices have? What happened because Stanley made that choice? It's almost like cause and effect, kiddos. The cause, Stanley makes the choice. What's the effect? What happens because Stanley makes the choice? That's what we call a consequence. The effect is the consequence. What happens because Stanley made the choice? So that's what we're focusing on today. So our theme is all about how choices have consequences. That's the what we can learn to apply to our everyday life, that the choices we make have consequences. And I want you to pick 3 big choices that Stanley makes and what their consequences are. So we're almost done, okay? So I want you on page 217. I'm on chapter 48. There are 3 chapters we're going to read through today, and then we're done. All right, here we go. Remember, Stanley and Zero just came out of the thing, and the suitcase has Stanley's name on it, okay? Let's see. They slowly walked back to camp. The tall man was the Texas Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer for the state. Stanley's lawyer was named Mrs. Moregno. Stanley held the suitcase. He was so tired he couldn't think straight. He felt as if he was walking in a dream, not quite able to comprehend what was going on around him. They stopped in front of the camp office. Mr. Sir went inside to get Stanley's belongings. The Attorney General told Mr. Pendanski to get the boys something to drink and eat. The warden seemed as dazed as Stanley. "You can't even read," she said to Zero. Zero said nothing. Mrs. Moregno put a hand on Stanley's shoulder and told him to hang in there. He would be seeing his parents soon. She was shorter than Stanley, but somehow gave the appearance of being tall. Mr. Pendanski returned with 2 cartons of orange juice and 2 bagels. Stanley drank the juice, but didn't feel like eating anything. "Wait," the warden exclaimed. "I didn't say they stole the suitcase. It's his suitcase, obviously, but he put my things from my cabin inside." "That isn't what you said earlier," said Mrs. Moregno. "What's in the suitcase?" the warden asked Stanley. "Tell us what's in it, then we'll open it and see." Stanley didn't know what to do. "Stanley, as your lawyer, I advise you not to open your suitcase," said Mrs. Moregno. "He has to open it," said the warden. "I have the right to check the personal property of any of the detainees. How do I know there aren't drugs or weapons in there? He stole a car too. I've got a witness. She was nearly hysterical. Why? Why is the warden being hysterical? Why is she freaking out? Because Stanley has what she's been searching for since she was a kid. The warden is the daughter of not the daughter, she's the granddaughter, I think that's right, the granddaughter of Trout Walker. Trout Walker is the man that killed Sam. And remember, Trout Walker and his wife, little Katie or whatever her name was, I don't remember what her name was. Remember, they take Kissing Kate Barlow, they wrap her up, they send her out, and they're walking and walking and walking, trying to find where she buried the treasure. And the yellow-spotted lizard bit her on the ankle, and she said, you're going to be digging, and your children will dig, and your children's children will dig to the end of days. That's why the warden digs. Because she knew Kissing Kate Barlow's treasure was out there somewhere. So now she's hysterical because Stanley's about to walk away with it. He is no longer under your jurisdiction, said Stanley's lawyer. He's not been officially released, said the warden. Open the suitcase, Stanley. Do not open it, said Stanley's lawyer. Stanley did nothing. Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Attorney General handed Miss Moragno a sheet of paper. You're free to go, he said to Stanley. I know you're anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange suit as a souvenir, or burn it, whatever you want. Good luck, Stanley. He reached out his hand to shake, but Miss Moragno hurried Stanley away. Come on, Stanley, she said. We have a lot to talk about. Stanley stopped and turned to look at Zero. He couldn't just leave him there. Zero gave him a thumbs up. I can't leave Hector, Stanley said. I suggest we go, said his lawyer, with a sense of urgency in her voice. I'll be okay, said Zero. His eyes shifted toward Mr. Pendanski on one side of him, with the warden and Mr. Sir on the other. There's nothing I can do for your friend, said Miss Moragno. You are released pursuant to an order from the judge. They'll kill him, said Stanley. Your friend is not in danger, said the Attorney General. There's going to be an investigation into everything that's happened here. For the present, I am taking charge of the camp. Come on, Stanley, said his lawyer. Your parents are waiting. Stanley stayed where he was. His lawyer sighed. May I have a look at Hector's file, she said. Certainly, said the Attorney General. Miss Walker, go get Hector's file. She looked at him blankly. Well? The warden turned to Mr. Pendanski. Bring me Hector Zeroni's file. He stared at her. Get it, she ordered. Why are they freaking out that they want the file? Remember, when Zero ran away, they deleted all of his records. They deleted everything. There is no file for Hector. Mr. Pendanski went into the office. He returned a few minutes later and announced the file was apparently misplaced. The Attorney General was outraged. What kind of camp are you running here, Miss Walker? The warden said nothing. She stared at the suitcase. The Attorney General assured Stanley's lawyer that he would get the records. Excuse me while I call my office. He turned back to the warden. I assume the phone works? He walked into the camp office, slamming the door behind him. A little while later, he reappeared and told the warden he wanted to talk to her. She cursed, then went inside. Stanley gave Zero a thumbs up. Caveman, is that you? He turned to see Armpit and Squid coming out of the rec room. Squid shouted back into the rec room, Caveman and Zero are out here. Soon all the boys from Group D had gathered around him and Zero. Good to see you, man, Armpit said, shaking his hand. We thought you were buzzard food. Stanley is being released today, said Mr. Pendanski. Way to go, said Magnet, hitting him on the shoulder. And you didn't even have to step on a rattlesnake, said Squid. Even Zigzag shook Stanley's hand. Sorry about, It's cool, said Stanley. We had to lift the truck clear out of the hole, Zigzag told him. It took everybody in C, D, and E. We just picked it right up. That was really cool, said Twitch. X-Ray was the only one who didn't come over. Stanley saw him hang back behind the others a moment, then returned to the rec room. Guess what, said Magnet, glancing at Mr. Pendanski. Mom says we don't have to dig any more holes. That's great, Stanley said. Will you do me a favor? Asked Squid. I guess. Stanley agreed somewhat hesitantly. I want you to... He turned to Miss Moregno. Hey, lady, you have a pen and paper I can borrow? She gave it to him. And Squid wrote down a phone number, which he gave to Stanley. Call my mom for me, okay? Tell her I said I was sorry. Tell her Alan said she was sorry, that he was sorry. Stanley promised he would. Now you be careful out in the real world, said Armpit. Not everybody is as nice as us. Stanley smiled. The boys departed when the warden came out of the office. The Attorney General was right behind her. My office is having some difficulty locating Hector Zeroni's records, the Attorney General said. So you have no claim of authority over him? Asked Miss Moregno. I didn't say that. He's in the computer. We just can't access his records. It's like they've fallen through a hole in cyberspace. A hole in cyberspace, Miss Moregno repeated. How interesting. When is his release date? I don't know. How long has he been here? Like I said, we can't... So what are you planning to do with him? Keep him confined indefinitely without justification while you go crawling through the back holes of cyberspace? The Attorney General stared at her. He was obviously incarcerated for a reason. Oh, and what reason was that? The Attorney General said, I see you, Boba. The Attorney General said nothing. Stanley's lawyer took hold of Zero's hand. Come on, Hector. You're coming with us. There never used to be yellow-spotted lizards in the town of Green Lake. They didn't come to the area until after the lake dried up. But the townsfolk had heard about the red-eyed monsters living in the desert hills. One afternoon, Sam the Onion Man and his donkey Mary Lou were returning to his boat, which was anchored just a little offshore. It was late in November and the peach trees had lost many of their leaves. Sam, someone called. He turned around to see 3 men running after him, waving their hats. He waved. Afternoon, Walter, Bo, Jesse. He greeted them as they walked up, catching their breath. Glad we caught you, said Bo. We're going rattlesnake hunting in the morning. We want to get some of your lizard juice, said Walter. I ain't scared of no rattlesnake, said Jesse, but I don't want to come across one of those red-eyed monsters. I'd seen one once, and that was enough. I know about them red eyes, of course. I hadn't heard about the big black teeth. It's the white tongues that get me, said Bo. Sam gave each man 2 bottles of pure onion juice. He told them to drink 1 bottle before going to bed that night, then a half bottle in the morning, and then a half bottle around lunchtime. You sure this stuff works? Asked Walter. I'll tell you what, said Sam. If it doesn't, you can come back next week and I'll give you your money back. Remember, if a yellow-spotted lizard bites you, you're dead. You're not coming back next week. Walter looked around unsure, and Bo and Jesse laughed. Then Sam laughed too. Even Mary Lou let out a rare hee-haw. Just remember, Sam told the man before they left, it's very important you drink a bottle tonight. You got to get it in your bloodstream. The lizards don't like onion blood. So why did Zero and Stanley stay safe from the lizards? Stanley and Zero sat in the back seat of Miss Moregno's BMW. The suitcase lay between them. It was locked, and they decided they'd let Stanley's father try to open it in his workshop. Now, you don't know what's in it, do you? She asked. No, said Stanley. I didn't think so. The air conditioning was on, but they drove with the windows open as well, because, no offense, you boys really smell bad. Miss Moregno explained that she was a patent attorney. I'm helping your father with the new product he's invented. He happened to mention your situation, so I did a little investigating. Clyde Livingston sneakers were stolen sometime before 3:15. I found a young man, Derek Doon, who said that at 3:20 you were in the bathroom fishing your notebook out of a toilet. 2 girls remembered seeing you come out of the boys' restroom carrying a wet notebook. Stanley felt his ears redden. Even after everything he'd been through, the memory still caused him to feel shame. So you couldn't have stolen them, said Miss Moregno. He didn't. I did, said Zero. You did what? She asked. I stole the sneakers. The lawyer actually turned around while driving and looked at him. I didn't hear that, she said, and I advise you to make sure I don't hear it again. What did my dogs quit making noises? What did my father invent? Stanley asked. Did he find a way to recycle sneakers? No, he's still working on that, explained Miss Monregno. But he invented a product that eliminates foot odor. Here, I've got a sample in my briefcase. I wish I had more. You two could bathe in it. She opened her briefcase with one hand and passed a small bottle back to Stanley. It had a fresh and somewhat spicy smell. He handed it to Zero. What's it called? Stanley asked. We haven't come up with a name yet, said Miss Monregno. It smells familiar, said Zero. Peaches, right? Asked Miss Monregno. That's what everyone says. Why does that smell familiar to Zero and Stanley? Because they were eating peaches. A short while later, both boys fell asleep. Behind them, the sky had turned dark, and for the first time in over 100 years, a drop of rain fell into the empty lake. Part 3, Filling in the Holes. Stanley's mother insisted that there never was a curse. She even doubts whether Stanley's great-great-grandfather really stole a pig. The reader might find it interesting, however, that Stanley's father invented his cure for foot odor the day after the great-great-grandson of Elia Yelnats carried the great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni up the mountain. So who is Hector Zeroni? The great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni. Remember, Elia promised Madame Zeroni that he'd carry her up the mountain, and he didn't. So she put a curse on his family. The Attorney General closed Camp Green Lake. Miss Walker, who was in desperate need of money, had to sell the land, which had been in her family for generations. It was bought by a national organization dedicated to the well-being for young girls. In a few years, Camp Green Lake would become a Girl Scout camp. Just what Mr. Sir always wanted. This is pretty much the end of the story. The reader probably still has some questions, but unfortunately, from here on in, the answers tend to be long and tedious. While Miss Bell, Stanley's former math teacher, might want to know the percent change in Stanley's weight, the reader probably cares more about the change in Stanley's character and confidence. But those changes are subtle and hard to measure. There is no simple answer. Even the contents of the suitcase turned out to be somewhat tedious. Stanley's father pried it open in his workshop, and at very first everyone gasped at the sparkling jewels. Stanley thought he and Hector had become millionaires. But the jewels were of poor quality, with no more than $20,000. Underneath the jewels was a stack of papers that had once belonged to the first Stanley Yelnats. These consisted of stock certificates, deeds of trust, and promissory notes. They were hard to read and even more difficult to understand. Miss Monregno's law firm spent more than 2 months going through the papers. They turned out to be a lot more valuable than the jewels. After legal fees and taxes, Stanley and Zero each received a little less than $1 million. Oh, less than $1 million, but not a lot less. It was enough for Stanley to buy his family a new house with a laboratory in the basement and for Hector to hire a team of private investigators. But it would be boring to go through all the tedious details of all the changes in their lives. Instead, the reader will be presented with one last scene, which took place almost a year and a half after Stanley and Hector left Camp Green Lake. You will have to fill in the rest of the holes yourself. Okay, so the author steps out here. And the author is talking directly to us as the reader. And it doesn't happen very often. But the author wants us to know some of the things that happened, right? But now we have one last scene with Stanley and Zero, a.k.a. Hector. There was a small party at the Yelnats' house. Except for Stanley and Hector, everyone there was an adult. All kinds of snacks and drinks were set out on the counter, including caviar, champagne, and the fixings to make ice cream sundaes. The Super Bowl was on television, but nobody was really watching. It should be coming on the next break, Miss Monrego announced. A timeout was called in the football game, and a commercial came on the screen. Everyone stopped talking and watched. The commercial showed a baseball game. Amid a cloud of dust, Clyde Livingston slid into home plate as the catcher caught the ball and tried to tag him out. "Safe!" shouted the umpire as he signaled with his arms. The people at Stanley's house cheered as if the run had really counted. Clyde Livingston got up, dusted the dirt off his uniform. As he made his way back to the dugout, he spoke to the camera. "Hi, I'm Clyde Livingston, but everyone around here calls me Sweet Feet." "Way to go, Sweet Feet," another baseball player said, slapping his hand. Besides being on the television screen, Clyde Livingston was also sitting on the couch next to Stanley. "But my feet weren't always sweet," the television Clyde Livingston said as he sat down on the dugout bench. "They used to smell so bad that nobody would sit near me in the dugout." "They really did stink," said the woman sitting on the couch on the other side of Clyde. She held her nose with one hand and fanned the air with the other. Clyde shushed her. "Then a teammate told me about sploosh," said the television Clyde. He pulled a can of sploosh out from under the dugout bench and held it up for everyone to see. "I just spray a little on each foot every morning, and now I really do have sweet feet. Plus, I like the tinkle." "Sploosh," said a voice, "a treat for your feet. Made from all natural ingredients, it neutralizes odor-causing fungi and bacteria. Plus, you'll like the tingle." Everyone at the party clapped their hands. "He wasn't lying," said the woman who sat next to Clyde. "I couldn't even be in the same room with his socks." The other people at the party laughed. The woman continued, "I'm not joking. It was so bad." "You made your point," said Clyde, covering her mouth with his hand. He looked back at Stanley. "Will you do me a favor, Stanley?" Stanley raised and lowered his left shoulder. "I'm going to get more caviar," said Clyde. "Keep your hand over my wife's mouth." He patted Stanley on the shoulder as he rose from the couch. Stanley looked uncertainly at his hand, then at Clyde Livingston's wife. She winked at him. He felt himself blush and turned away toward Hector, who was sitting on the floor in front of an overstuffed chair. A woman sitting in the chair behind Hector was absent-mindedly fluffing his hair with her fingers. She wasn't very old, but her skin had a weathered look to it, almost like leather. Her eyes seemed weary, as if she'd seen too many things in her life that she didn't want to see. And when she smiled, her mouth seemed too big for her face. Very softly, she half sang, half hummed a song that her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a little girl. If only the moon speaks no reply, reflecting the sun and all that's gone by. Be strong, my weary wolf, turn around boldly, fly high, my baby bird, my angel, my only." And that's it, kiddos. We did it. Okay, so Stanley had to make a lot of choices in our book. I gave you some hints at the beginning of the video. I want you to think back through everything that we've read, and I want you to tell me 3 big choices Stanley makes and what the consequences are. What are the effects of his choices, okay? I love you guys. I've really enjoyed reading Holes to you. So you'll do this today. Tomorrow is Free Friday. You'll get to pick any activity that's on the menu to complete using everything we've read, and then we'll start our new novel next week. I love you guys. Come here, Moose. Say hi to the kiddos. There's Moosers. He says hi. He's been whining at my feet the whole time. I love you guys, and I will see you guys later. Okay, Moose, get down so I can go turn the phone off.